Hi, my name is Brooklyn, and I've learned the worst bruises don't always show. Some of the deepest wounds don't leave a mark on your skin. They settle in quieter places, like your voice, your confidence, the way you hold yourself in a room full of people who never really saw you. I grew up in a house where I was present but never truly noticed. The second child to Oscar and Sandra. Parents who provided what they had to, but rarely what mattered most. My older brother Martin was the golden boy, the center of their world. From the moment he was born, it was like they handed him the sun and made the rest of us orbit around him. He didn't have to earn it. He didn't need to prove himself. Martin brought home a B, and they threw a party. I brought home straight A's, and all I got was a distracted nod or a mumbled good. If he scored a goal at soccer, Dad practically lost his mind with joy. I won a writing competition once, first place in the whole state, and Mom barely looked up from her phone. I stopped showing them things after a while. It just hurt too much to keep pretending their reaction would be different. Birthdays, holidays, they were the worst. Martin got new gadgets, expensive sneakers, even a personal gym membership when he turned 16. Me? I got blank journals, off-brand scarves, and the same sentence every year. We know how much you love simple things. But that wasn't true. I didn't love simple things. I just learned to accept them. Because what I really wanted was never the gifts. It was the effort, the intention, the feeling that I mattered. Eventually, I started to shrink myself just enough to avoid their disappointment. I tried not to take up too much space. I tried to be helpful, quiet, invisible enough not to make them angry, but still hoping, deep down, that maybe one day they'd turn around and see me, really see me. But not everyone treated me like I didn't count. My grandmother, Jennifer, lived 2 towns over in a little brick house with a garden that always smelled like lavender and bread. Her hands were always busy, but her heart never was. Whether I was 5 years old with skinned knees or 25 with tired eyes, she always made room for me, always listened, always saw me. She had this way of holding my hand across the teacup and saying, "Bro, you are not invisible. Not to me. One day they'll realize what they threw away." And I clung to those words. I carried them with me through every family dinner where I sat silent while they celebrated Martin's made-up business ventures. Through every time my mom pretended not to know me in front of her friends, but bragged endlessly about Martin's potential. Through every sharp comment from my dad about how I needed to stop seeking attention, when all I ever wanted was to feel heard. Jennifer was the only one who reminded me that I wasn't crazy for wanting more. So I stayed quiet. I played along. I kept hoping that maybe if I was kind enough, useful enough, patient enough, they'd finally give me the kind of love they handed Martin without question. But I was wrong. Because what I didn't know back then was that being ignored was just the beginning. They weren't just going to overlook me. They were planning to erase me entirely. It happened on one of those slow, gray Sundays that feel heavy with memory. I had just finished helping Jennifer plant lavender in the backyard. Her garden was our little world. Quiet, safe, a place where I didn't have to pretend to be someone else. We went inside, the air smelling like honey and damp earth, and she put the kettle on like she always did. But this time, something felt different. She was quieter, more deliberate. When we sat at the table near the window, she reached into a drawer and pulled out a large envelope, her fingers resting on it like it carried weight. "I've been meaning to show you this for a while," she said, her voice soft but steady. "It's time. I thought maybe it was old letters or family recipes, but when I opened it, my hands started shaking. Inside were documents, official ones, property deeds, bank records, a draft of her will. I flipped through them slowly, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The house, her savings, a stock, portfolio. Jewelry passed down from her mother's mother. All of it, everything, was being left to me. I looked up at her, stunned. "Grandma, why me?" She reached across the table and took my hand like she always did when she wanted me to feel grounded. "Because you've spent your whole life earning what they took for granted," she said. "I watched how they treated you, how they elevated Martin and made you feel small. But you never lashed out. You never gave up. That kind of strength, it deserves to be protected." I didn't know what to say. I had never expected this. Never. Even imagined it. She could have split it. Given it all to Martin to keep the peace. But she didn't. She chose me. Not because I asked. Not because I begged. Just because she believed I was worthy. She told me she hadn't shared it with anyone yet. Not my parents. Not Martin. "But they'll sense it soon," she said, letting out a tired breath. "Especially Martin. That boy's got jealousy in his bones." And she was right. It started off subtle. Martin stopped replying to my texts. If I showed up to a family dinner, he'd toss little jabs at me, disguised as jokes. "Careful, everyone. Brooklyn's probably here to take notes for her future estate." Or, "Must be nice having Grandma as your personal retirement plan." He didn't know anything for sure, but he was sniffing around, and that suspicion started to fester. Mom began making snide comments about some people manipulating the elderly. Dad would chuckle and say things like, "Can't wait to see who's loyal when the will gets read." They thought they were being clever. They weren't. I kept my head down, said nothing. I didn't want drama. I didn't want to fight. Somewhere, deep inside, I still held on to that thread of hope. That maybe they'd come around. Maybe, for once, they'd see me and not just look past me. But hope, as I'd learned, can be a dangerous thing. Especially when it's tied to people who've already made up their minds about who you are. Jennifer. She kept telling me to let them talk. "When people don't have your peace," she'd say, "they'll attack your name instead." I believed her. I wanted to believe that my silence was strength. That by staying kind, staying calm, I was choosing the high road. But what I didn't see, what none of us could fully see at the time, was that something was already building behind the scenes. A quiet storm. And when it hit, it wouldn't just shake things up. It would try to destroy me. The day of Martin's wedding arrived with clear skies and picture-perfect weather. The kind you'd expect for a celebration that cost more than most people's houses. The venue was a massive lakefront estate, all glass walls, white orchids, and chandeliers so bright they looked like stars had been dragged indoors. Everything sparkled, everything except the way I felt. I wore a soft blue dress that Jennifer had given me. Not flashy, not expensive, but elegant in its own quiet way. It was one of the only things that felt like me. The dress my mother originally offered? It was used, something she pulled from the back of a closet, probably worn to a funeral a decade ago. Meanwhile, Vanessa, Martin's bride, was gifted a custom designer gown just for the pre-wedding photos. My mom called it a gift from this family. But I knew exactly which part of the family didn't count. Still, I showed up. I helped arrange the flowers, calmed Vanessa's nerves when she started tearing up over her eyeliner, even reorganized the seating chart when the planner lost the original. I didn't do it for Martin. I didn't do it for our parents. I did it for Vanessa. She'd always been kind to me, and that counted for something. But even as I moved through the motions, smiling at guests, helping where I could feel it. That low, tight feeling in your stomach when you know you're not welcome. Sandra, my mom, gave me a stiff half-smile when I arrived. The kind that says, "You're only here because you have to be." Oscar didn't even look at me. He made a point of walking past me twice without acknowledging I existed. And Martin? He looked through me, like I was one of the waitstaff, not his sister. Not the person who'd run errands and chased down vendors and filled in all the last-minute gaps to make this day go smoothly. Jennifer had a seat reserved near the front, tucked just off to the side where she could watch everything but stay, out of the center. She wore lavender, her favorite color, and sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap. Every time I looked over at her, she gave me a small nod, just enough to say, "You're not alone." The ceremony itself was flawless. Martin and Vanessa exchanged vows under a massive arch of white roses, while soft violin music played in the background. Everyone clapped and smiled. And for a moment, just one, I let myself believe maybe things were okay. Maybe this day could pass without damage. But that feeling didn't last. There was something off in the air. You know that quiet before a storm? The kind where the sky looks calm, but you feel the electricity just under your skin? That's what it felt like. The smiles seemed too wide. The laughter a little too forced. Every glance from Martin felt like he was watching me, measuring something, waiting. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was being paranoid, told myself I was just tired. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't just a celebration. Something was coming. I could feel it. And I don't think I was the only one. Because when I caught Jennifer's eye during the reception, her smile faltered for just a second. Not fear, not panic, but recognition, like she sensed the storm too. The music faded out and the DJ announced it was time for speeches. One by one, people stood, up with their champagne glasses, telling stories about love and laughter, cracking polite jokes and sharing memories. It was typical wedding stuff, harmless, predictable, until Martin stepped up to the microphone. The second he started talking, I knew something was wrong. His smile was gone. His hands gripped the edges of the podium like he was bracing himself. And his voice wasn't nervous. It was controlled, tight, like someone trying to hold back something ugly. "There's something I need to say," he began, scanning the crowd. "It's not easy, but I can't stand here on the most important day of my life and pretend everything is fine." The room went still. People lowered their glasses. Even the servers paused mid-step. I sat frozen, heart pounding. He looked directly at me. "This morning," he continued, "I found out that someone very close to me, someone I trusted, stole $150,000 from us, our honeymoon fund. It's gone." There was a collective gasp, like a wave moving across the room. I stared at him, confused, terrified, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. And then he said it. It was my sister, Brooklyn. I felt the floor disappear under me. For a split second, I thought he was joking, that this was some twisted, wildly inappropriate prank. But his face was stone cold. I stood up slowly, my voice shaking. "What are you talking about?" Didn't even flinch. "Don't play dumb. You had access to the planning documents. You knew the payment schedules. You helped organize the entire thing. You had every opportunity." "That's not true," I said, my voice cracking. "I didn't touch anything. I didn't even know where that money was kept." Vanessa looked at him, stunned. Her eyes flicked from me to Martin like she didn't know what to believe, and then Sandra stood up from her seat like she'd been waiting for the cue. "How could you, Brooklyn?" she shouted. "At your own brother's wedding? After everything this family has done for you?" Oscar's jaw clenched, and I saw his hands curl into fists. He wasn't just angry. He looked unhinged, like something inside him had snapped. And then, before I could even process what was happening, he stood up so fast his chair screeched behind him. "Dad?" I said, barely, able to breathe. He didn't answer. He just stormed across the room like a man possessed. The wedding photographer, who had just finished a group shot, was standing near the edge of the dance floor with his camera mounted on a heavy gimbal. "Sir, please, don't touch that," the photographer stammered, confused. But it was too late. Oscar grabbed the rig with both hands and yanked the camera free from its stabilizer. He spun around, gripping the gimbal like a weapon, and came straight for me. I didn't even move. I couldn't. My body locked up in disbelief, like my brain refused to believe my father would actually. Then he swung. The metal and plastic of the camera smashed into the side of my head with a sickening crack. It felt like a bomb went off in my skull. I dropped instantly, my shoulder slamming into the edge of a table before I collapsed onto the floor. Glass shattered, plates clattered. I could hear people screaming, but it was all muffled, like I was underwater. My vision blurred. Blood streamed down the side of my face. My ears were ringing so loudly it drowned out everything else. I could taste metal. My body was shaking, and I couldn't tell if it was from fear or pain or both. And then, through the ringing, I heard her. She deserved it. Sandra's voice cut through the air like a blade. "She's a liar and a thief. I raised a monster." No one stopped them. No one stood up for me. Except one. "Enough," Jennifer's voice boomed over the chaos. She moved through the stunned crowd like a force of nature, her eyes blazing. She dropped to her knees beside me, her hands trembling but firm as she held my face. "Call 911 right now," she shouted. When no one moved fast enough, she pulled out her phone and did it herself. "My granddaughter has been assaulted," she told the dispatcher, voice like steel. "At a wedding. Head trauma, blood loss. I need an ambulance and police immediately. 3 individuals are involved, the father, the mother, and the brother, and I will testify against all of them." I could barely see her, but I felt her hand gripping mine. Steady, strong. I was drifting in and out, slipping between pain and blackness. But one thing was clear. Jennifer wasn't letting go. Not this time. Not ever. The sirens were still echoing. In the distance, when Jennifer stood up and walked toward the front of the room, everything had gone silent. No music, no chatter, not even whispers. Just the hum of overhead lights and the soft static from the microphone as she reached for it. The same mic Martin had used to try and tear me down. She didn't tremble. She didn't fumble with her words. She stood there, tall and calm, in her lavender dress, and looked out over the crowd like a judge in a room full of witnesses. And when she spoke, her voice didn't shake. It carried. "Before these 3 are taken away," she said, nodding toward my parents and brother as officers hovered nearby, "I have something to say. And I want everyone here to hear it. You could have heard a pin drop. No one dared move. This young woman, my granddaughter Brooklyn, has endured a lifetime of neglect, of cruelty, of being silenced by the very people who were supposed to love her most." There were murmurs. A few people gasped. Some looked down at their shoes. She was never given the same care, the same attention, or the same pride they poured into Martin. And now, after trying to erase her spirit for years, they tried to erase her completely, with lies, with violence, and with shameless public humiliation. I could barely keep my eyes open from the pain, but I heard every word. It cut through the fog like light. "I want to make something perfectly clear," Jennifer continued. "My entire estate, every home, account, investment, and heirloom, totaling over $4 million, has been legally designated to Brooklyn. That decision was mine. Not because she asked, not because she manipulated me, but because she's earned my trust, my respect, and my love." Gasps rippled through the room. I saw Vanessa, standing on the edge of the crowd, cover her mouth with her hand. Her eyes weren't filled with confusion anymore. They were filled with understanding. These 3, Jennifer said, turning toward Martin, Sandra, and Oscar, have not only betrayed their own blood, they've shamed themselves, and I will press full criminal charges. They don't deserve applause. They deserve accountability. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly some guests started to nod, a few even clapped, and then Vanessa stepped forward. Everyone turned as she marched, across the hardwood floor toward Martin. Her heels struck the ground like a gavel. Her face was blank, still, cold. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She just pulled the diamond ring from her finger, extended her hand, and let it fall to the floor between them. It hit with a sharp little clink and rolled to a stop near his shoes. "We're done," she said quietly. "For good." Her parents turned away in disgust. They didn't even try to defend him. They just left without looking back. And Martin? He didn't say a word. He stood there, wrists cuffed behind him, his eyes wide with disbelief, like he was watching a dream collapse and didn't know how to wake up. The officers began to escort the three of them out, guiding them through a crowd that now stared with a mix of shock and quiet judgment. And just like that, the wedding was over. No first dance, no cake, just handcuffs and shattered illusions. Jennifer rushed back to my side as the paramedics finished securing the stretcher. She held my hand as they lifted me, refusing to let go. "I'm going with her," she told the EMTs, and they didn't question it. They just nodded and made room. The venue doors opened, and for a moment I could hear the click of cameras, the murmur of voices, the sound of something unraveling behind us. But I didn't care. I didn't look back, because even though my head throbbed and my body ached, for the first time in my life I wasn't afraid. I felt something else instead. Peace. Real, quiet peace, and the steady grip of the only hand that had never let me fall. The ambulance ride felt endless, even though I barely remember it. I just remember the weight of Jennifer's hand in mine, the soft beep of machines, and the sting where blood had dried against my skin. At the hospital, they moved fast. Stitches, scans, questions. I heard them mention possible concussion, laceration near the temple, keep her monitored overnight. I nodded when they asked, but my mind was somewhere else entirely, not on the pain, not even on the attack. I was already planning what came next. Jennifer never left my side. While I lay in that bed, watching the ceiling blur in and out of focus, she was already making calls, legal calls, press calls, quiet, deliberate moves. By morning, she'd already set up a meeting with the best attorney in the state, Mark Wilson. "He doesn't just win cases," she said. "He dismantles legacies built on lies." I didn't argue. I didn't hesitate. I was done shrinking to make others comfortable, done pretending silence was strength. So when she told me we had an appointment that afternoon, I sat up, slow but steady, and said, "Let's end this." Mark's office was exactly what I expected. Neat, understated, powerful, without needing to say so. He listened more than he spoke, took notes while I told the whole story. From the years of being ignored, to the setup at the wedding, to the strike that split my head open in front of 200 people. He didn't interrupt. He didn't look surprised. He just nodded slowly and said, "This isn't a family issue. This is criminal, and we're going after all three." We gave him everything. Video footage, cell phone recordings, text messages, from Martin trying to intimidate me. Audio of Sandra yelling, "She deserved it." Even screenshots of Martin's shady attempts to pressure Jennifer before the will was finalized. Jennifer brought in her notarized estate documents, all properly, dated, signed, and witnessed. Mark looked through everything and said the words I'd been waiting to hear. "We've got them." By the end of that week, We had filed both criminal and civil charges: aggravated assault, defamation, inheritance obstruction, emotional abuse. It wasn't just about punishment. It was about truth, proof, making sure they never did this to anyone again. The courthouse felt like stepping into another world: cold floors, high ceilings, heavy silence. But I didn't walk in as the quiet girl who used to flinch when her father raised his voice. I walked in with my head high, Jennifer beside me, Mark on my left, and a fire inside me that nothing could put out. Oscar, Sandra, Martin. They sat at the defense table in stiff, uncomfortable suits, trying to look composed. But their eyes told the truth: fear, anger, shame. And when the footage played, me getting hit with a camera, Sandra's voice calling me a monster, Martin's fake accusation, the jury didn't flinch. A few even looked visibly disturbed. Then, Vanessa took the stand. She didn't hesitate. She told the court that there was never a missing honeymoon fund, that Martin had made it all up the night before, after a long, tense call with Sandra. That he told her, word for word, "If I humiliate her, maybe Grandma will change the will." You could feel the air shift in that room. Then Jennifer stood and told the truth she'd been holding in for years, how she'd watched me suffer, silently. How she chose me because of the strength I didn't even know I had. How the others didn't just fail as family, they failed as human beings. Her voice didn't crack once. Finally, I took the stand. I told them what it felt like to grow up invisible, what it did to a person to always be second, even when you gave your first. I told them how I wasn't there for revenge. I was there because I had finally found my voice, and I wasn't letting them take it again. "I'm not protecting anyone's reputation anymore," I said. "Not when they use that reputation to cover up the truth." The defense tried their best, claimed it was a misunderstanding, family tension, misinterpreted emotions. But the jury didn't buy it. Not with the evidence, not with the testimonies, not with the truth sitting so loudly in the room. The verdict came in that same afternoon. Guilty. Oscar was sentenced to 3 years in prison for aggravated assault. Martin got 2 years for defamation and malicious intent. Sandra, 18 months, for complicity and emotional abuse. The judge's closing words echoed through the room. This court does not tolerate violence masquerading as family loyalty. The law does not excuse cruelty under the mask of tradition. As they were led away in handcuffs, I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just exhaled. For the first time in my life, it felt like the weight they'd spent years pressing down on me had finally lifted. Like justice had finally stepped into a room they thought they owned. And this time, I wasn't the one walking out in silence. They were. A week after the trial, I sat across from Jennifer at the same table where she first handed me that envelope, the one that changed everything. This time, there was no tension, no warnings, just peace. She slid a thick folder across the table, placed a gold pen beside it, and said gently, "It's all here, Brooklyn. The house, the accounts, the assets. Everything is yours now. It's done." I looked at her for a long moment before I picked up the pen. Not because I wasn't ready, but because for the first time in my life, someone was giving me everything without expecting me to be anything else. I signed the paperwork slowly, carefully, and when I was done, she reached across the table, rested her hand on mine, and whispered, "You've turned pain into power, my girl. Now do something with it." And I did. I didn't move to a mansion in the hills. I didn't take a luxury vacation or disappear from the world. Instead, I started something that had lived in my heart for a long time. I called it the Haven Project, a nonprofit dedicated to helping women and young adults who had survived emotional abuse, family neglect, or betrayal that made them question their worth. We opened the doors with a small team and a big purpose: legal aid for survivors of psychological and domestic abuse, temporary housing for those leaving toxic environments, counseling, financial literacy, community, everything I had needed but never had. A place where people could be seen, heard, and helped, without judgment, without strings. Jennifer became our co-founder. She refused to be just a figurehead. Every morning, she'd show up with her pearls, her pressed blouses, and a fresh pot of tea. Everyone started calling her Grandma J, and they loved her instantly. Her advice was firm, but her hugs were legendary. We grew quickly. Within 6 months, we were serving over 100 families. Not a week went by without someone pulling me aside and saying, "I thought I was the only one." Each time, I'd tell them what Jennifer once told me: "You're not invisible, not anymore." Pouring myself into that place healed something I didn't even know was still broken. I wasn't just reclaiming my life, I was helping others do the same. Not in theory, in real, tangible ways. And the more I gave, the more whole I felt. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebuilding. My parents are still serving their sentences. Martin tried to appeal his, but failed. Last, I heard, he moved out of state and was struggling to hold down a job. I don't wish him pain, but I don't forgive him either. Some things you don't come back from. Vanessa came to visit once. We had coffee. She apologized. I told her she never owed me one. She believed in Martin, and that wasn't a crime. We parted on good terms. As for Jennifer and me, we kept growing the haven together, laughing over old memories, smiling at the new stories we were helping shape. Because when you've been through hell and survived, there's nothing more powerful than handing someone else a map to climb out to. Some nights, when the office is quiet and everyone's gone home, I sit on the front porch with a cup of chamomile tea in Jennifer's favorite porcelain mug. I watch the lights flicker across the garden beds we planted: lavender, daisies, sunflowers, flowers that refuse to wilt, even in harsh soil. Kind of like me. I think about how close I came to being erased, how easily a lie, when spoken by someone you trust, can turn the world against you. A brother's jealousy, a mother's cruelty, a father's rage, a room full of people willing to believe the worst. But I don't live in that story anymore. I live in a different chapter now, one where the truth stood its ground, one where justice wasn't just an idea, it became real, one where the girl they tried to break became the woman who builds safe places for others. Do the scars still ache sometimes? Yeah. Do the memories still sting? Of course. But they don't define me. I'm not the forgotten daughter. I'm not the scapegoat sister. I'm not the girl they tried to silence. I am a survivor, a leader, a builder, and the people who tried to destroy me, all they did was show me just how unbreakable I really am. If this story moved you or reminded you of your own fight for truth, please like the video, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe. We tell real stories that deserve to be heard, and your support helps keep those voices alive.